So I am seeing a few people. I'm sure you hear Daddy talk about this all the time, but when you're able to see the brethren that you're speaking to, it does a lot because you feel like you're not just speaking to a blank screen, you're actually interacting with people. So those of you who are showing your face this morning, I appreciate that. And I'm hoping that the discussion that we have this morning will be an interactive one. Right? If you have any questions, any comments, feel free to interject. What I'm going to share this morning is something that is very basic and elementary, something that we have been over many times, and something that most, if not all of us on this platform this morning are familiar with. But I find that sometimes when you go over things, it reinforces them in your mind, and you see some things that you never necessarily saw before. So I'm hoping that that will happen this morning. And in addition to that, there are some truths that become truer with each passing day. Right? If I say to you that we're all getting older, that's truer today than it was yesterday, and it's going to be even truer tomorrow. If I say the world is becoming more wicked, that becomes truer each day. And if I say Jesus is coming soon, that's much truer today than when I heard it for the first time almost 40 years ago. So some truths cannot lose their relevance because the relevance increases with each passing day. And what I want to look at a bit this morning is one of those truths. And that is the truth that Jesus is coming soon and we're living in the very last days. So I'm going to begin by looking at a verse in Luke chapter 17. At verse 26, the disciples came to Jesus and they asked him, what will be the sign of the end of the world and of your coming? And Jesus said something which we can all quote by heart by now. I'll read it nonetheless. Luke chapter 17, verse 26, and I'll read to verse 30. It says, and as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be also in the days of the Son of Man. They did eat, they drank, they married wives, they were given in marriage, until the day that Noah entered into the ark, and the flood came and destroyed them all. Likewise, also as it was in the days of Lot, they did eat, they drank, they bought, they sold, they planted, they builded. But the same day that Lot went out of Sodom, it rained fire and brimstone from heaven and destroyed them all. Even thus shall it be in the day when the Son of Man is revealed. Now, on the face of this, you can see very clearly what Jesus is saying. Right? He's saying, if you want to know what things will be like in the days before I return, look at these two dispensations. And he's saying that in the same way that they were complacent and indifferent to the things that were happening around them, and in the same way that they went about living their daily lives as if nothing was about to happen until the very day that the destruction came, the same kind of attitude will exist in the earth again just before he comes. Right? That is the primary meaning that I'm seeing coming out of this passage. But he's also saying, if you want to know what things will be like just before I return, look at the way they were in the days of Noah. And look at the way they were in the days of Lot. So I want to focus on those two periods of time, but I'm not going to have enough time to do both this morning. So what I've decided to do is to split my presentation into two parts. I'm going to do part one this morning, and I'm going to entitle it The Age of Doom. And the next time I have the privilege to present, I'll do part two. Okay? So this morning I want to spend some time looking at how were things in the days of Noah. Because if we can identify similarities between that time period and today, then according to Jesus, it is the time of the end. And as I said to you before, brethren, if there's any point that you wish to make or any question or any comment, please feel free to do so. So The story of Noah begins in Genesis chapter 6. And I went back to Genesis chapter 6 to find out what was it that was happening in the days of Noah that was so striking that Jesus used this dispensation as a parallel to his return. Genesis chapter 6 and verse 5 says, "And God saw the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually." I taught English language for many years, and one of the things that stands out to me in this verse is the use of the three extreme adjectives to describe the condition that existed in this time period. The first one is every. That means nothing is excluded. It says every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only. Another extreme adjective. It was only evil continually. The third extreme adjective. So what the idea that God is trying to portray in this verse is that all of the talents and intellectual capabilities and the creativity that these people possessed, and it was great, all of these things that they possessed, they used it for one purpose only. And that purpose was to commit evil. Now I ask myself the question, what was so bad about evil that these people were committing that caused God to say, it repented him that he had made man? Because when you think about it, every society from the days of Adam until now that has ever existed has committed evil. Everyone, including the people of God who were the Israelites, right? From the Pharaohs all the way down to the Caesars. They committed murder, rape, they worshiped idols. Some of them, in the more primitive societies, they offered human sacrifices. They even offered babies as sacrifice. And all of them have been guilty of great evil. So what was so different about what the antediluvian society was doing that made God say he repented that he had made man? What was so great about what they were doing and also different about what they were doing that God had to destroy their society? And we know that other than Sodom, no society was ever actively destroyed by God. So what was so bad about these people? And I asked myself that question, and I concluded that the problem or the defining issue with these people was not just that they were committing evil, but it was the kind of evil they were committing. And I know you're going to ask the question, are there different kinds of evil? And the answer that I would give you to that question is no and yes. And I'll explain a little bit of what I mean as I go along, right? There are two kinds or two levels of sin that it's possible to commit. And as I said, it might sound a little off, but as I go along, you will understand better what I'm saying. So I read further into the chapter to find out what was so bad about what these people were doing. And I came to verse 11 and 12, and I got a much better understanding. It snapped in my mind as to what the issue was. Verses 11 and 12 of Genesis 6 says, "The earth was also corrupt before God. It has been corrupt all throughout the ages ever since." So there's nothing unusual there. "And the earth was filled with violence." Violence has existed all through the ages of man's existence. "And God looked upon the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted his way upon the earth." And in the last part of that verse, I think we get a critical component in answering the question, of what was so bad about the kind of evil that these people were committing. Let's look at what the last part of the verse said. It said, all flesh had corrupted his way upon the earth. Notice it did not say humans or mankind had corrupted his way. It says all flesh. Now, what I understand this phrase to mean is that whatever was happening was not limited or restricted only to humans. It was something that spread to the animals and the other living creatures that were on the earth. The corruption spread to all living things on the earth. Now it says all flesh had corrupted his way. Whose way? They had corrupted God's way. Now we all know and agree this morning that animals are not capable of making moral decisions, right? A dog cannot choose right or wrong or be held guilty of doing right or wrong. So when the Bible says that all flesh had corrupted his way, what I understand this to mean is that mankind had corrupted everything on the earth, including that corruption had spread even to the animals. Whatever they were doing encompassed not only humanity, but it spread into the realms of animals and maybe even nature as well. So, how did mankind corrupt his way upon all flesh? What we need to understand and to realize is that in the beginning, my favorite period of time, in the beginning, God made everything his way. He made everything his way. He made the sun to rise in the morning and set in the evening. He made dogs to mate with dogs and produce dogs. He made cows to mate with cows and produce cows. He never made a donkey and a horse to produce a mule. He made every creature according to the Bible after his kind. He made a man to be with a woman, and he made a man to be a male and a woman to be a female. He made everything his way. And the Bible says that when he had finished all of his work, in Genesis chapter 1, verse 31, it says, and God saw everything he had made, and behold, it was very good. In other words, when God finished creating, everything was perfectly the way that it should be. Everything was in perfect harmony, in perfect balance. Not one atom was out of place. And the only one who knows all things and who has the power to create and control the forces of creation saw that all things were perfectly the way it should be. He didn't make pigs with 6 legs. He made them with 4. Everything was the way it was supposed to be. So when the Bible says his way was corrupted, you can kind of have a better understanding of what it was talking about. When God created, he established 2 laws. He established moral law first of all, right? When he said to Adam and Eve, don't eat of the tree, that was a moral law. The 10 Commandments were not given in Eden, but inside of man, the concept of right and wrong, inside of his conscience, the laws of morality were written. God gave him moral law. When Cain killed Abel, Cain knew right away that he had done something wrong, right? But God also established, and we touched on this a bit last night in worship, God also established natural law. Natural laws are the laws which control nature, right? When you throw something up into the air, it comes down. The wind blows, the sea comes to a certain place and it stops. Natural law are the laws that they control and hold the fabric of creation together. And the only one who has the right and the knowledge to tamper with natural law is God. Mankind has tried to do this, and it has always led to disaster. You know, when they started launching spaceships into space, and they started using aerosol sprays and air conditioned units, they had no idea of the effects and the repercussions. And today, the ozone layer, which was around the world to protect humanity and all life from the harmful ultraviolet rays of the sun, today that ozone layer is almost completely destroyed. Right? In fact, there are some scientists who believe that at the rate that the ozone layer is being destroyed, the world cannot last another 50 years. Right? That is what some scientists believe. So when mankind tampers with natural law, he's stepping into a realm that is above and beyond him. Man thinks that he knows and understands these things, but the truth is that he has no idea of the consequences and the outcomes. So when God put natural law in place, only he has the right and the authority to interfere in this realm. So to the point that I made earlier, when I said there are two levels of sin or two types of sin, here's what I mean. When you break a moral law, for example, you steal, commit adultery, these laws affect the consequences of these actions affect those yourself maybe and maybe those in your immediate surroundings, right? If you murder somebody, it affects those who are immediately around you. And this is what we call, I would call this natural sin. If a man commits adultery with a woman, it's a sin. But it's a natural sin because he's doing it with a woman, and God made man to be with woman. So it's a natural sin. But when man tampers with the laws of nature, then the consequences, only God knows how one ripple in the ocean is going to affect everything around it. The consequences of tampering with the laws of nature. Man has no idea of the real consequences, only God. So the consequences of interfering with natural law can be deadly and dangerous, and that is why man has no scope to enter this zone. So unnatural sin, in my opinion, in my understanding, are sins which are committed against the laws of nature. So when God naturally puts a man with a woman, for example, and the man goes and copulates with a lion, for example, they are a very brave man. It's the same sin, but it's in this case it's an unnatural sin because of the consequences. So what I'm saying is that the consequences of natural sin and unnatural sin are different. So when the Bible says man was corrupting his way upon the earth, what was happening was that these men, presumptuous and bold and barefaced, had started interfering with natural law, the way God had established things from the beginning of time. They were messing with the fabric of creation itself, right? So allow me to use my creative license, my imagination, to give you an idea of what some of the things I think they were doing, right? And you can reason it out because it says, it didn't only say they were breaking a few natural laws. It says every imagination of their hearts continuously was focused on how to corrupt God's ways. And one of the things I can assure you is that the intellect of these people far surpass ours. So if they decided to be creative, trust me, they were very creative. So of course, I can see a society where men started to marry men. We are told as much in the Babylonian Talmud. It says that the only time in history when men signed marriage contracts with other men was in the days before the flood. But as I said, they were far more creative than that. I can see a situation where women also started marrying women. Right? Their aim was to corrupt his way on the earth. Mothers started marrying their daughters. fathers started marrying their sons, and the most base and depraved things that they could think of, they started making these things normal in the society. Started convincing. Somebody wanted to say something? All right. If there's a point, feel free to go ahead. All right. So they started making depravity and defacing of the image of God normal. And they convinced each other that they had the right to do these things. Right? I can see a situation where men started copulating and maybe marrying even animals. Men started trying to be women, and women started trying to be men. They started to mutilate their own bodies to try to change the way God had made them. I don't know if they had any equipment to do operations to change their organs, right? But men started acting like men, and women started acting like women. The extent of their depravity spread, the Bible said, upon all flesh. So what they were doing extended, it was extended upon the animals, right? And it's easy to imagine some of the things they probably tried to do. They tried to breed one kind of animal with another kind. They probably mutilated the poor animals, trying to change them from the way God had made them. You know, I'm just going to share an opinion with you this morning. I'm not teaching it as a doctrine, but it's just something I've been wondering about because my mind, it's very imaginative, and sometimes I think a lot of things. But a few years ago, I read a statement from Ellen White where she says that one of the reasons why the earth was destroyed by the flood was the amalgamation of man and beast. Right now, I know that today there is no technology that can be used to fuse animal and human DNA. That kind of technology has not been discovered yet. Could it be that the people of that generation who were far more brilliant than we are, sorry, some of them were the direct sons and grandsons of Adam, the perfect human prototype. They probably could read a book and remember the entire book word for word in a few minutes, right? Their IQ and intellect far surpassed ours, which has been degraded by generations of sin and depravity. Did they find some kind of way to fuse animal and human DNA? I don't know, right? Plato, the Greek philosopher, he told a story that he got from his father, who got it from his grandfather, passed down to them through thousands of ages, by word of mouth. He told a story of a civilization which existed thousands of years ago. According to him, it was when the world was young. He says there was a race of people who lived on the earth who were taller and fairer than all the generations which came after them. He says that these people were the pinnacle of human existence, and they were so brilliant that they had devices which could do fantastic things, right? And one of the things that he says of this city is that they created hybrids to protect their city. But he says they became so greedy and corrupt in their ways that the gods in their anger sent a tsunami to swallow them and sank them to the bottom of the sea. Right now, this place in mythology, this place is called Atlantis. I think it's probably a story that sprang somehow from the story of the flood when you look at what he said about it, right? But I found it interesting that he spoke about hybrids. And as I said, I'm not teaching this as truth because the Bible doesn't say it. I'm just tantalizing our imaginations, right? And when I get to heaven, and I'm studying the antediluvian world, if I find out that they've somehow found a way to fuse animal and human DNA, I would not be surprised. right? Put it that way, because they were brilliant people. Our society has just started to develop. We discovered electricity 140 years ago. The first car was invented 140 years ago. The internet was discovered about 40 years ago, right? So this explosion of technology that you see around you, which we are now enjoying, we have this. It has taken us less than 200 years to come up with all of these things. So what could a man who lives to be 800 and 900 years, who is far superior to any scientist of this generation in intellect, what they could have come up with and invented and developed, the things they could have done, we don't know, right? One thing we can tell for sure is that they spread the corruption that they were doing upon all flesh. And the corruption, sorry, the intellect that they had was used for evil. It was used to interfere with the natural order of things. It was used to interfere with the way God had established and set up creation. So, my understanding of what the great sin of the antediluvian world was that they became so emboldened, so presumptuous, so barefaced, that they took it upon themselves to change the natural order that God had established from creation. They took it upon themselves to venture into the realms of nature and natural law, and to think that they knew more than God, to change the image of his creation and to fix it how they want to fix it. This was the great sin of the antediluvian world. Right? It wasn't what we would call normal sin. And I challenge anybody on this platform this morning to show me another society from the days of Noah 5,000 years ago until today. Show me another society that went so far as this, that they started to try to change even the way the animals were created. Right? And probably they interfered with other things too, like trying to mess with with the weather or the trees or whatever else, right? I've searched and I've found great depravity and I've found great evil and sinfulness in other societies. The Romans were probably the most cruel nation that ever existed on this earth. But no society ever went as far as the antediluvians did in terms of trying to change the image of humanity itself and all flesh around them. No society ever went that far until now, until today. Those of us who have our eyes and ears open, and you're looking at the things that are happening around us in plain sight on TV and the internet, you see these things happening around you. And if your spiritual senses are not awakened by what you are seeing, then it is because you have no spiritual perception, or you are just ignorant. Because the same exact things are happening today. You know, the Chinese have developed machines which can control the weather, right? They have machines that can instigate rain. So that they are producing these, they are mass producing these machines in China, and they plan to distribute them all over the country, so that the government can decide when rain falls and where it falls. In fact, the 2008 Olympics were held in Beijing, and they used these machines to prevent rain from falling for the 2 weeks that the event lasted. Not one drop of rain fell, right? Because they used these machines. So man can now decide what happens with the weather, right? He thinks he's so wise and he's so smart that he can decide when rain should fall. And as I said to you, when man interferes with natural law, he's dabbling in things he has no understanding of, because nobody knows the consequences of interfering with natural law except God. So that is one of the things that is happening in the world now. Man has presumed to control the weather. But more than that, many of you are aware of the new technology they have developed called CRISPR. CRISPR is a technology which they can now use to edit genes. And when I say edit genes, just like how you can go on the computer and edit a document and fix it the way you want to fix it, CRISPR is a new technology that allows them to edit human and animal DNA, right? So what they do, for example, I'm seeing Brother Benny Will, so let me use him as an example. Brother Benny Will is born with black hair, and he doesn't like how he looks. So with the CRISPR technology, what they can do is go into the gene that instructs the body to have black hair, and they can edit that gene, and Brother Benny Will suddenly has blonde hair, right? You don't like the color of your eyes, which are gray. They can edit the gene which controls eye color, and you can suddenly have blue eyes. They have used this they have experimented in laboratories using this technology with rats, and they have been able to turn black rats to white and white rats to black, right? One of the things the guy who was explaining the technology said, he said that many people are born and they don't like the way they look. We no longer have to be prisoners of the genes that we were born with. So if you have the money and you want to change the way God made you, you can just go to the scientists and they perform whatever edits you wish to be performed on you. So you want a straighter nose, all they need to do is edit the gene that controls your nose. You want a deeper voice, they can now control how a person looks and how a person develops. They can use the technology on a fetus in the womb, right? So if your wife is pregnant and you want your white baby to be black or your black baby to be white, they can control the kind of pigmentation that the genes instructs the body to construct, right? And one of the things I found striking, one of the leading scientists who helped to invent the technology was explaining how the whole thing works. And you know, at the end of his presentation, his statement, this is what he said. He said, finally, we can be like gods. And I found that statement striking because it was the same exact thing that Satan said to Eve in the Garden of Eden, right? And this is what mankind wants. He wants to put himself in a position where he is God. He controls nature. He controls the weather. He controls the animals. He wants to corrupt his way upon all flesh. The same thing is happening again, right? Man is daring. He's saying to God, what you have done is not smart, it is not wise, it is not good enough. I know better, and I can adjust what you have done. And it was the same thing that happened in the days of Noah. But you know, man thinks he's wise. He thinks he is wise. But he will learn very soon that the wisdom of this world is foolishness with God. They say that even though this CRISPR technology is so fantastic and it can do so many things, what has been happening is that they have a problem because each time you edit one gene, they find that that change in that gene is causing mutations in other genes. So they are baffling their minds over that dilemma because they don't know how to solve or fix the problem. And of course, how would they? Because they are not the creator. The only one who has the right and the authority and the knowledge to step into the realm of nature is he who created it. And so this is what man is doing now, right? Trying to become God. We know that cloning, they have been cloning animals for the last 40, 50 years, right? They have cloned a variety of species of animals. And in the shadow of the CRISPR technology, the cloning seems to be primary school stuff now, right? But they have also inbred and interbred over 30 species of animals. When I was a boy growing up, the only hybrid that I knew about was a mule, right? A mule is a combination of a donkey and a horse. The only hybrid that I knew about was a mule. Today they have created over 30 hybrids. They have a creature called a liger. A liger is a combination of a lion and a tiger. They have another one called a beefalo. A beefalo is a combination of a cow and a buffalo, right? And they have experimented and they have created over 30 hybrids, as I said, right? What are the repercussions of these experiments? Creating animals that God didn't make, changing his way? We don't know. But one person knows. Now, I hope you're with me so far, and I hope that I'm getting my point across. When God created the world his way, God made one and only one kind of sexuality, right? Only one. And that is the kind of sexuality that we today call heterosexuality. That is a man being with a woman and a woman being with a man. That was how things were when God made the earth his way and saw that it was very, very good. Now there's a movement upon the earth today which started out, when it started out, it was called LGB movement. And then it morphed into LGBT. And today it has morphed and morphed and morphed. It is now the LGBTQIA plus. L stands for lesbian, B bisexual, G gay, T transgender, Q queer, I intersex, A asexual, and the plus is for whatever else is to be added in the future. So God made one sexuality. Here come the wise men of the world. Here come the ones who believe that they are gods. Here come the ones who are trying to corrupt his way upon the earth. And there is, if you go online and check how many sexualities are there. I took the trouble of doing that this week. And I'm not going to even bother to try to explain what each one of these things are. I'm just going to read to you what they are saying about how many types of sexualities exist on the earth now, when God created only one. So, according to experts, experts have all agreed that there are multiple categories of sexuality. So a person can be allosexual, androsexual, asexual, autosexual, bicurious, bisexual, closeted, demisexual, pansexual, fluid, gay, graysexual, gynesexual, heterosexual, heteroflexible, homoflexible, lesbian, queer, questioning, sapiosexual, sex repulsed, scoliosexual, spectrasexual. And just by reading that list, I am tired, right? I mean, it's absolutely insane and ridiculous that men who have PhDs and they have studied for years and they have claimed to be the experts upon the world, this is the conclusion that they come to. The Bible says God made man to be with woman. And these men who are the learned men of the world, they come and they say, listen, God doesn't know what he's talking about. God's way is foolishness. And they have now classified sexuality into, it was 22 different categories. Can you see that mankind is again corrupting his way on the earth? Can you see that that is happening plainly before our eyes? I mean, it is even more subtle than that. What they have done now they have started to try to corrupt God's way at the educational level, right? I watched a video where schools in elementary schools in Canada and I think England, they have revised all of their textbooks. When I used to teach about types of family. I used to teach about the nuclear family, the extended family, single parent family. What they have done now is to revise all the textbooks to be more inclusive. And these books now teach that they have added different categories of family. And of course, one of those is the same-sex family. So they have started to institutionalize corruption of God's way at the elementary school level, right? These same schools, they have a special period of time that they call it drag queen time. And this time is dedicated to a big grown man dressing like a woman coming into the classroom and reading stories and singing songs to the children and teaching them that it is okay to be whatever you want to be because God's way doesn't matter. And I'm thinking to myself that by the time these children become teenagers, they won't even know what God's way is on the earth because what they have been taught from elementary school level is so corrupt that they will not be able to even identify God's way. And on top of that, they are teaching them evolution, right? So I am seeing a scenario in which God cannot allow the next generation to mature because by then they will have surpassed what was happening in the days of Noah. The babies are being taught that the corruption of God's way is normal. My cousin, I saw something posted in a chat last night. They have rewritten the Superman comic. So Superman is now gay. And the supervillain, Lex Luthor, he is now homophobic, right? So the hero of the story is the one who decides to corrupt God's way, and the villain is the homophobe who opposes his lifestyle, right? They have rewritten the Batman and Robin comic, and Batman and Robin are now lovers. They have rewritten the Cinderella story, and the fairy godmother is now a transgender. And the story of Beauty and the Beast. There are a couple of characters in that one that are gay as well, right? It is now impossible to turn on the TV and you don't find some movie in which some kind of corruption of God's way is being promoted, right? The ones who practice these kinds of lifestyles are the ones who are the heroes. They are the ones who have the happy endings. And children are being indoctrinated via these methods and these means to believe that this is the natural order of things, while subtly they are corrupting God's way upon the earth. And you know, one of the things that came to mind when I was thinking about these things, Jesus says that whoever causes one of these little ones to fall, it will be better for him that a millstone be tied around his neck and he be cast into the midst of the sea, right? And so, as I'm saying, this world is the only dispensation. Not this world, this current society is the only dispensation which is mirrors to the letter the corruption of God's way upon the earth, as it was in the days of Noah. Another thing that is happening, and I'm hurrying along because I don't want to overstep my time. Another thing that is happening, another abomination, I call it, another corruption of God's way. The Bible says, male and female created he them. God created two genders. He created male and female. But what does God know? Who is God to define who we are? Who is God to tell us how we should live? Here is what experts who clearly know more than God say. This woman, one of the leading experts in the field of gender, she has a Master of Science, so she probably knows what she's talking about. This is what she says. Her name is Jackie Golub. Jackie Golub provides insight into some commonly confused ideas surrounding gender identity. So let us hear what Miss Jackie has to tell us. She says genitalia does not equal gender. The organ a person is born with does not signify a person's gender identity. Gender is a term that relates to how we feel about ourselves, the way we choose to express ourselves through makeup, through dresses, through high heels, athletic shorts, sneakers, and more. And she finishes off now with a real beauty. She says, our society has convinced us that there are just two options for gender, male and female. But in reality, there is much more fluidity. This woman is a professor. She lectures at some of the top universities in the world. She is adored and respected worldwide as an expert in her field. And the article that she has posted is on Google for all to see. And this is what she's teaching: blatant and barefaced corruption of God's way. What she's saying is that God doesn't know what he's talking about. God says you are male and female. That is an old, archaic concept. In reality, there are far more genders than that. Let me give you a list of the genders that she has outlined here. So it's possible for any of us to be any of these genders. This male and female concept is archaic and rubbish. So you can be cisgender, transgender, cishet, non-binary. Non-binary is when you do not identify as male or female. You can be intersex. You can be genderqueer. Genderqueer does not identify as man or woman. Or genderqueer can identify as both man and woman. You can also be gender fluid. This is where your gender is flexible and may vary from day to day. So today you might be a female, tomorrow you might be a male, the following day you might be genderqueer, and your gender varies according to how you feel on that day. You can be gender non-conforming, or you can be agender. Agender is a person who does not identify with any gender. They ask to be addressed using the pronouns they or them instead of he or she. And you can also be gender void. Now, you listen to this and you think, how can intelligent, educated people with brains that work conceptualize things like these and teach them? And the world accepts these because it is the opinion of experts which have undergone extensive scientific study. And you realize that something is happening to the world, that it's in a state of insanity. It's in a state of madness, right? We are once again at the place where God is repenting that he has made man. And I don't see how the antediluvian world could have been worse than this. I don't see how, right? And the thing about it is that when you hear them speak about these things, you go on some of these internet forums and you hear them speak in this matter-of-fact way, as if, what are you arguing about? This is an established fact. There's nothing to argue about here. What's the debate about? Right? And so the Christians have to watch and be aware of what is going on. It's total insanity happening all around the world. And we need, those of us who have children, we need to make them aware of these things and aware of the implications of these things. Now, as I said, I'm hurrying along because I don't want to overstep my time by far. Right? Let me just share a few more things with you that are happening around the world. September last year, a 26-year-old girl, all of what I'm saying, you can just simply Google it. if you want to find more details. A 26-year-old girl was married to her biological mother, this is last September, to live as husband and wife and build a new family. There were rapturous shouts of joy and ecstasy as the couple paved the way for a new type of love to be displayed. A mother marrying her daughter. April of this year, a 47-year-old woman in Malawi married her 30-year-old son. She said that she had spent too much money on him to allow another woman to benefit from him. Again, there was a great crowd at the wedding and everyone cheered the joyous occasion. Joseph Gisso from Australia married his dog. And in case you didn't hear what I said dog. Joseph Gisso married his dog Honey in a sunset ceremony. The union was sealed with a kiss in the presence of dozens of ecstatic guests. Amazing. It's like you're reading a fairy tale, right? But these are actual things that are happening around the world. And as I said, you just have to Google it. July 2019, 49-year-old Elizabeth Hood stunned viewers by marrying her dog Logan on daytime television. According to her, no one else in the world understands me like he does. Right? For those who don't know, it is legal for you to marry an animal in Hawaii, in Kentucky, in Nevada, in New Mexico, in Ohio, Texas, Vermont, West Virginia, and Wyoming. In all of these places, in the land of the free and the hope of the brave, it is legal for you to marry an animal, and nobody can stop you. The law cannot do anything about it. Listen to this one. I'm going to read this entire excerpt because I found it both amusing and disgusting at the same time. It says, Irishman Aidan O'Connell married Oliver, his favorite 25-year-old horse, at Bunratty Manor Hotel. Aidan told H&H, there are not many 65-year-olds like myself who are able to take a partner 40 years their junior down the aisle. So this man is boasting to his friends that, listen, I'm marrying my bride is young. She's 40 years younger than me. And he's proud about that. Dr. John Hassett, a veterinarian, was the best man. And the matrimonial officer was Reverend Doherty from the Diocese of Killaloy. This is a priest, an ordained priest. After the Reverend had asked if anybody in the congregation knew of any reason why the couple should not get married, he proceeded with the ceremony. So here are the words of the minister now. Aidan Doncada O'Connell of No Fixed Abode, do you take Oliver Equus, that's the horse, as your lawful partner in marriage, with equal sharing of laundry, cooking, and ironing? To which he replied, yes, I do. Then he returned to Oliver, the horse, and asked the same question. And the witnesses report there was a definite nod of the head. So the witnesses are exulting and rejoicing in this matrimonial union because the horse, according to them, nodded his head in approval of the vows that he took. A reception was held at the Bunratty Manor Hotel following the service, where the speeches were reported to be of a humorous nature. The best man read out messages of goodwill from friends who were unable to attend. You know, what comes to mind is Romans chapter 1, verse 32. Romans chapter 1, verse 32 says, who knowing the righteous judgment of God, that those who practice such things are worthy of death, they not only do the same, but take pleasure in them that do them. And it was the same thing in the days of Noah. You had the leaders and the proponents of the defiance, the open and barefaced defiance of God, shaking their fist in the face of God and saying, we don't care what you have done or set up or established. We are going to do things our way, and we are going to force it upon everybody else. And you have those in the background cheering and saying, yes, we endorse what you are doing. We concur. We agree with you. And the Bible says those who do this, those who don't speak out against this, those who don't stand up against this, you are just as guilty as the ones who are doing these things. I'll read one last one because I'm over my time already. A German newspaper says that animal brothels are on the rise as bestiality becomes a lifestyle choice. An animal protection officer in the German state of Hesse has expressed frustration with a German law that makes spreading bestiality porn illegal, but the act itself legal. So this man is frustrated that they allow bestiality in Germany, but they are banning bestiality porn. How dare they? He's frustrated about this. Nevertheless, bestiality brothels, and for those of you who are not aware of what I'm talking about, bestiality brothels are places in Germany and other parts of Europe where a grown adult can go, choose any animal that he so desires, and pay to have sexual intercourse with that animal. There are places like that that exist today in this modern
Madness.
society.
Madness.
Insanity.
It's just madness. Madness, madness, madness.
Yes,
Jesus.
Sister Annie, cannot have been worse in the days of Noah. So, bestiality brothels are spreading through Germany and other parts of Europe and are also referred to as erotic zoos. Just think about that. They're also referred to as erotic zoos. In one case, a German farmer noticed that his flock of sheep started to shy away from human contact. So he added cameras and found that during evenings, men were sneaking onto his land to have sex with his animals. I'm going to stop here this morning because I'm over my time, but I am sure that you will all agree with me that no time in the history of this world has ever fitted the description of the days of Noah more than today. There is no time when man has decided that he is God and he's going to stand in the place of God. He's going to change the nature of God in marriage. He's going to corrupt God's way in gender. They actually do physical operations today to change people's gender. A man can go to the doctor and surgically remove his organ, and they can then replace it, surgically create a female, the outline of a female organ in place of where his organ was. And they can do the same with, with women. I read of a story where a man was spending thousands of dollars trying to implant a uterus into himself, right? And you realize that the Spirit of God is all but gone from this world, right? The only place you can find it now is in His people. Because when you find this level of depravity, this level of, and this determination to corrupt God's way and God's image to such an extent, it tells you clearly that the Spirit of God no longer exists on this earth in the same way that it did before. Men are now possessed. Some of these things that I hear happening, I am convinced that it has to be that they are demon possessed. Or it could just be man displaying what he really is like without the Spirit of God. So, once again, we have come to the age of doom. We are living in the very last days. And anybody who is unable to see that, you need to wake up and you need to look at what is going on around us. You need to look at the fact that His way is corrupt, and it's corrupted in all flesh, just like it was in the days of Noah. And Jesus says, when you see that again, then know that the end is near. The one they have disrespected, and the one they have scoffed at, and the one they have frowned upon, they will see him again very soon. And woe be unto those who have defied him. But the good thing about it is that Noah and his family found grace in the eyes of the Lord. And all of us today who make him our friend, you know what? We'll be safe. We'll be safe. So I thank you, brethren, for listening. I hope that the points that I was trying to make and the parallel that I was trying to draw came across clearly, right? And I hope that we will now become more alert and pray more diligently, because the end is near. So thank you for listening. I'll take your silence as an indication that everything was clear and you understood all that was being said. Thank you for your participation, and may God bless you.
Amen. Thank you,
Good
Dad.
job, Daniel.
Amen.
David, I have a question for Daniel about that DNA. I don't know if he got locked out by the internet for a few seconds, but he was explaining that they were able to make the color of a white rat into black and vice versa, but then they couldn't figure out something else that was happening behind that, and that's when it cut off. Can you explain that one more time, a little piece?
Yeah. The thing is, these scientists, these people who think they know everything, they're discovering that they don't. When DNA, they have mapped the human genome, and they've been able to tell how many genes there are. And at one point, they were saying that there is something that they call junk DNA. What it means is that there are some parts of the DNA that they can't understand what it is good for, and so they label it as junk DNA, meaning it's not really used for anything anymore. It's like they believe it was in the process of evolution, some parts of it became defunct, and so they thought it was junk. Now they are finding out that the DNA is so complex that it is performing functions that they have no idea what it is doing. So now what Daniel was saying is that they edit one gene and they discover that it's messing up the rest of the DNA, so that mutations are taking place in other areas that they did not know were connected to that one gene that they edited. So that's what he was basically saying. I mean, they say, I've read something that is, I don't know how anybody can be so abysmally stupid. I cannot think of enough labels to label a person who understands DNA and thinks that it came about by chance. There are not enough words to label the stupidity of somebody who can look at this. You know, when you look at a code, it is linear. Okay. In other words, there's a sequence to the way that the information is laid out. But what they have discovered about DNA is that it is three-dimensional. In other words, if you read it this way, it gives instructions. If you read it this way, it gives a different set of instructions. If you read it this way, it is still giving instructions. So you think you're reading the message this way and you take out something. You're not affecting just this level of instruction. You're affecting it on this level and also on this level. And you have no... One day I will try to explain what I'm trying to say, because this kind of coding, I don't even think a computer could do it. When you understand the concept of what they have really found out about how DNA works, it blows your mind. I try not to go to extremes, but when I understood it, I was lost. And then I wonder, how could anybody who understands a little bit about the way this thing works suggest or believe that it happened by chance? You know, so getting a little bit outside of my lane here, but that is what he was saying, Brother Raymond. They edit the gene, they edit one gene, and they're finding out that it's affecting the genes in other areas that they have no clue of the connection.
So
So
something like having tumors and things like that popping out of the critter, right? Like, they change the color of the hair and everything, but all of a sudden now bump starts coming up in different places and tumors start growing, things like that.
something like
So I
that.
think like that, yeah. Okay,
And it's not just, I mean, if you understand genes, okay, genes just don't tell you where your heart goes. They don't just tell you the color of your eyes. There are instructions there that tell your body when does the heart start growing, when does the eye appear. It has time information coded in as well. It's not just information about places. It has information about where each thing is to go. There are levels and avenues to the information that poor men, they have no idea of how the genes work. They're just playing around on the surface when they find out that this gene might control this color. The whole thing is a highly super computerized thing that they're just beginning to barely understand. So I mean, it's like a little boy who just learns to walk and he thinks he's ready to run the Olympics. I mean, it's kind of like the barefacedness of humans to tread into this realm. It's like Daniel says, they interfere with the weather. You know, I've heard somebody say this. It's a philosophical question, but the question is, if a butterfly flaps his wing on this side of the world, does it affect what happens on the other side of the world? It sounds like a philosophical question, but it is not. It is not a stupid question, because nobody understands how one little simple thing affects everything else except the creator. You interfere with the weather here, and you cause a tornado on the other side of the world. You cause a drought. You cause a desert to develop. Who knows? But man thinks he's God, and that's a part of, I think, what Daniel was saying. This is that when men go to this place, the planet has reached a place where the only thing that will save humanity is God stepping in. And we're pretty much at that place now, brothers and sisters.